Good evening, everyone. The Undergraduate Research Conference, the 6th edition of the URC, has finally drawn to a close. It started a few years ago with the vision to not just promote undergraduate research, an area oft overlooked and deemed to lack serious intent, but to also introduce students to the fascinating and newer ways of approaching analytical thought, argumentation, academic writing, and presentation. Over the last few days, we have tried to challenge the mores of traditional ideas of research, and hopefully for a number of our student presenters, performers, and of course, our student volunteers, this has been an experience which would be unforgettable. As we draw to a close, we welcome for our valedictory address, Mr. Sanjoy Roy. Cultural entrepreneur, managing director, Teamwork Arts, founder member of the Salam Balak Trust, and of course, a person of varying nuanced talents and wearing many hats at the same time. Before I hand over the stage to my colleague for an introduction, I would actually like to introduce us to the fruits of the kind of labor that a lot of our students put in on a regular basis. Needle, which is the magazine that JSLH is associated with, has just launched their current issue on humor. And I would like to invite the members of the editorial team, Ira Sinha, Oishika Sen, and Ananya Pandey, to come up here and gift Mr. Roy and Dean Madrowski copies of their magazine. A little bit about Needle. Needle is a student-run creative arts and culture magazine from the Liberal Arts School, and that seeks to bring together voices from different schools of O.P. Jindal Global University. Each issue focuses on a particular theme, which ranges from politics to philosophy. They have now published 3 issues of Time, Care, and most recently, Humor. The idea behind Humor, as some of you would be getting samples of the magazine as well, was to explore how, given the current political climate, humor can be used as a tool to uplift and disparage communities, in addition to being a mechanism with which to subvert stereotypes and remove inhibition on taboo phenomena. So with that, we have launched the most recent edition of Needle, and we thank the members of the editorial board to share their time with us. I now request my colleague and co-convener, Dr. Gargi Bharadwaj, to come up here and introduce our keynote speaker for the evening.
It is my privilege to introduce someone as eclectic and as highly accomplished as our guest this evening. He's a man of many hues, as Yashodhara said. Please join me once again in welcoming Mr. Sanjay Roy. He's a theatre practitioner, organizer, and cultural entrepreneur. He's managing director, Teamwork Arts, a highly versatile production house with wide-ranging interests in performing and visual arts, film and television, and the social sector. He's also a founder trustee of the Ishara Puppet Theatre Trust, co-chair of the Committee on Creative Industries, FICCI, and global advisor of the Earth Day platform, alongside working with and advising several government and non-governmental organizations across the world. He has produced or directed over 50 theatre productions, which have toured across the world and won a number of awards, including the Herald Angel Award and the Spirit of the Fringe at Edinburgh Festival. His current productions include Bollywood Love Story, a musical, The Music and the Magic, Dawn, a guide based on R.K. Narayan's novel. He's also directed and produced over 1,000 hours of a wide range of film and television shows, including drama series, game shows, news magazines, and lifestyle programs. Sanjay Roy is currently the festival director for Shared History Festival in Johannesburg and Durban, Eye on India, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, India on the Nile in Egypt, India on the Bosphorus, India by the Bay, Meta, the Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards that just concluded, in fact, Kala Utsavam Singapore, Kahani Festival India, the Ishara International Puppet Festival, and most notably, the Jaipur Literature Festival, described by Google as the greatest literary show on earth. Teamwork currently designs and produces 33 annual arts festivals across 42 cities in 17 countries. He's also the founder trustee of Salam Balak Trust, which provides support services for street and working children in the inner city of Delhi. For its contribution towards empowering the lives of children, the White House presented Salam Balak Trust in 2014 with the US President's Committee of Arts and Humanities Award for an international organization. He continues to lecture widely across the world on creative industries, cultural sector, and festivals. He's a recipient of numerous awards, including the C.F. Andrews Award, Tagore Award for Social Innovation, National Award for Excellence, and Best Director for the film Shahanabad, The Twilight Years. With that, Sanjay Roy, you're very welcome to JGU. May I invite you to please come and deliver the 6th valedictory address for URC 2023.
Thank you so much, Gargi, Dean, Professors, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. I suspect the only reason I really get invited is because I've got long hair, and that's the reason why I travel the world like I do. But when I received this call from Jindal University, my panic instinct was to say no, and I said, let me check, primarily because of the traffic and the time that it takes to come here. But when I realized it was a Sunday, I said, oh, maybe it'll take less time. No such luck. That too is a myth and a fallacy. It took me 2 hours, 20 minutes. But I think it's important for all of us to come out and speak at universities and colleges today. Because really, I think our generation and the generations before us have failed the planet and have failed you all. And you really are the future to anything that can be done that is positive, and perhaps do it in a way that's different from the way that we've done it. Earlier today, or in the professor's room, we were talking about the world, and we tried to solve some of its problems in 15 minutes, didn't quite get there. But I thought what I could do is tell you a couple of stories and also just sort of look at some of the responsibilities that we have in front of us. I was very impressed by the program that I saw that you all have had for the past 2 days. And what impressed me was the diversity and the fact that the inquiry that you had was so rigorous on everything from gender and identity to LGBTQ to all of the other issues. So why is inquiry so important? And why are you all so privileged to be part of this process of inquiry? Today, if we don't inquire, we are dead in the water. Yes, I know that we think that we're receiving great knowledge through Google and through WhatsApp University, but WhatsApp University does not necessarily have the access to considered information and dialogue, say, that you all would have in a university like the Jindal Global University. And for that, I think all of you should be really grateful. And why is it important to have considered information? Why can't we all just do googly things and assume that we're learning by doing googly things? Well, because in today's day and age, there are many different points of view. And that's something that the arts teaches us. It allows us to see that any issue can well have many different perspectives. And each of those perspectives could well be true. There's not necessarily only one truth. It's not necessarily that only the left is right, or the right is right, or the middle of the center is right. All of these truths can coexist. And it is for each one of you to find what is your truth. And the only way to do that is through considered knowledge and information. Today, the world around us, we're seeing the primary emotion seems to be hatred. It's very easy to hate. It's very easy to hate each other. It's very easy to hate somebody who doesn't seem like they belong. It's very easy to make that hatred take one step forward and be turned into violence, as we are seeing all around us. Day before yesterday, or 3 days ago, there was the 396th case of mass gun violence in the United States, and that's sort of described as more than 4 people being shot at any one point of time. This is 2023. In 2023, the very crucible of democracy, which is seen to be the United States, doesn't think it's odd to arm its citizens against those who are most vulnerable. And I think that's a big issue there. I was saying to Dean a little while ago that when I was in America, not so long ago, I was in Houston inquiring and talking to a group of very eminent people and academics from the University of Houston, but mostly very rich Houstonians. And most of the people in that room justified the insurrection of 6th of January on the Capitol. And when I explained to them, or when I tried to sort of challenge them and push back and say that, should this have happened in Brazil or Africa or Nigeria or India, you all would have turned around and said that this was a threat to democracy. And this was the reason why tin pot democracies like the South are at risk. But they didn't see it like that. It was their perspective. And because it was their perspective, I think it's even more important for the liberal world to step up to the table and be able to push back to some extent. We are celebrating what we know as Amrit Kal, right? I'm sure all of you have been party to some celebration or the other, celebrating 75 years of India's independence. 70 odd years ago, our founding fathers came together with their considered collective knowledge to create fundamentally what became the most important document of the last 100 years, which is the Constitution of India, which was then looked at by so many emerging nations, everybody from South Africa, who borrowed from the Constitution of India and progressed that. Remember when the Constitution was set up in 1947, etc., the first elections was held. Every individual in India was given the vote. Remember, in Australia, the Aboriginals only got that right in 1987. Till 1964, the Aboriginal in Australia was labeled as flora and fauna. And if you went and shot an Aboriginal, you got 500 Australian dollars, as you would if you shot a kangaroo. In the United States in 1967, the black and women, to some extent, were given the privilege of finding the vote if they could answer how many jelly beans were in a jar. That was some of the questions that were asked of them. So we had this privilege of, right from the very inception, been given what was the most important thing that any one of us can and should exercise as a right and a duty, is the right to vote. But looking back at India, 75 years, what's changed? We still continue to have the largest number of poor people in the world. And that's 75 years later. What can we do to make a difference? Yes, we have caste politics and we have reservation and we have economic activities and coming to Sonipat. I saw 1 million flyovers sort of going all over the place. I suspect some don't even go anyplace. They're just being built for whatever reason. There is progress. Where there used to be slums, Burari, Narela, which I drove through, these were on the outskirts of the city. Today they're built up, and hopefully they have some water and electricity and everything else along with all the buildings. But is that enough? What do we need to do to be able to make some of this, make a difference to some of these areas? What do we need to do collectively? Can we find new innovation? Can we find new technology? Technology is all around us, making our lives easier. Each one of you in this room today is an artist because you've got a mobile phone which you're looking at right now, and you're being connected to the world, and you can take photographs because you're a photographer, and you can be connected and make a comment. Of course, technology is empowering, but for who? For those of you who have access to bandwidth, right? Those of you who have a smartphone, those of you who know how to utilize this to be able to be part of the worldwide grid. During COVID, when there was a lockdown and schools started putting on their classes online at Salam Balak Trust, at DMRC, which is one of our largest or larger residential programs with about 150 kids, we had only about 35 smartphones. So can you imagine 150 kids trying to do their classwork on 35 smartphones and desktops, etc.? Almost impossible. But we're in Delhi, so we had an advantage. What about the rest of the country? What could they do? What of the artists and artisans and the craft people who were creating work but had no access to be able to sell their work because they didn't have a way or bandwidth to be able to get online? How can technology empower them? All of us today here are part of the liberal arts school. My thought has been for a while, of course, I got 4% in math, just for the record, in the 11th grade. Today I sit on some international math association for the dissemination of the practice of math. Again, long hair more than anything else. But I feel that if you're not able to understand the necessities of science and the inquiry that science brings to the fore, you're not going to be able to create the innovations that you all, as liberal thinkers, have access to. Why is it important for science and the arts to come together? The arts can envision. The book said, "Can I get to space?" 2001 Space Odyssey. The scientists then said, okay, let's find a way to be able to get you to space. And they created the designs and the possibilities of taking you there. Both these disciplines are absolutely vital for all of us today. Again, even as your smartphone is your thumb, so to speak, remember everything that's driving your phone is an algorithm, is mathematics, is coding, is science. and that is empowering your life. So can we use that to be able to benefit those who have nothing? Can we use that to be able to reach that farmer who's lost his crop because of the rains that we've had for the past 4 days? Can we use that to empower him with information that this storm could be coming? You need to perhaps reap your crop earlier because the 4 days of rain is going to destroy your crop. Can we empower them and the government machinery to say that if you're going to be reaping this crop in advance, you need the facilities to be able to do storage, to ripen the crop, new technology, solar energy, to be able to ensure that all of this is made possible and the farmer at the end of the day does not suffer. And why should the farmer not suffer? Because we are all dependent on food. Swiggy finally will call up whoever and get your food, but it's that farmer who's growing the food that supplies it to the restaurant or the cloud restaurant, which gives it to Swiggy to get to you. I'm not entirely sure how you all get food here, but hey, I'm sure there must be a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. When you come to the cusp of technology, knowledge, arts, what is it that you can do? You can be inspired. You can be inspired to do what? To innovate. On the 20th of March, when the lockdown happened in 2020, we were all in our, 23rd of March, we were all in our homes and we had no access to our offices. But we said, let's start JLF's Brave New World, an online series. And what we did is we quickly started working with all our university partners, whether it was London School of Economics or King's College or MIT or the Harvard Business School or Houston or Monash. And our whole thought was that if there has to be a super fast invention of any cure or understanding of COVID, it can only come by the sharing of collective information. So it was on JLF's Brave New World that Dr. Sharad Paul first talked about how this was impacting a person's DNA and gene. It was there that Dr. Siddharth Mukherjee, coming out of the operation theater from John Hopkins, came out and said, people are not necessarily dying of COVID, but they're dying of the blood clots that are being formed because of COVID. It is the place that Professor Yuan from the Wuhan Institute said that she thought in her inquiry that between the bat and the pangolin, there was an intermediary. And it wasn't just bat to pangolin in the wet market. And today, so 2 years later, we're realizing that it was perhaps the civet cat that was the intermediary between the bat and the pangolin. And even as we started doing this, we had no idea of who was watching out there this series. You know, we were just sort of rolling them out 6 a week and hoping that people were watching. 6 weeks later, when we started looking at some of the numbers coming in, we realized that tens of thousands of people were watching. And by the end of that first series, 4.5 million people had watched this in some way or the other. And when we did our first online festival in 2021, 27.5 million people watched a Jaipur Literature Festival series online. And that changed our perspective in terms of reach. Because before that, for those of you who've come, you know, our maximum capacity was 500,000 people who used to come through our gates in any given year. And this blew our mind. Because earlier it used to be primarily 45% used to come from Jaipur and Rajasthan, 12% from Gurgaon and Delhi, and the rest, 11% from outside the world, and the rest was from 1.5% Bangalore and Calcutta and stuff like that. Today, the facts and figures are so completely different. The maximum viewership we have online is from the northeast of India. The second largest population is actually not the Delhis and the Bombays and the Gurgaons, but it's the Cuttaks and the Kochis and the small and the Meerats and the smaller cities that actually have no access to us. Internationally too, it completely changed. While US and UK still stood first and second, third was China, fourth was Germany, fifth was Indonesia, sixth was Uzbekistan. No idea why. I kept telling my colleagues, they're watching porn, coming on our site and then going off to do whatever. But apparently not, because it was 11%, 11 minutes of viewership time was the average. And this then made us realize that knowledge again is something that was so vital and important and unavailable that you had people then watching us online, watching us for free, were these great minds from across the world. So what is the responsibility that all of us collectively have today? Each of you, when you wake up in a free society, in a democratic free society. But is our democracy working? And that's a question that each of you have to ask yourselves. And having asked yourselves, ask of yourself, therefore, what is your duty? We talk about free and fair elections today, right? If you look at the amount of money that's raised by the ruling party versus the opposition party, so it's 3,000 odd crores that the ruling party raises, and it's 700 odd crores that the collective opposition is able to raise. Is that a level playing field? Today, the first off the post, or first through the post, wins a seat. So at 50 point whatever percent, nobody is able to achieve that in terms of a percentage vote, right? So your ruling party perhaps today vouches for 39% of all voters. So 70 or 60 odd percent is still not represented by the ruling party. But you're faced by rules that govern you today because of this particular imbalance. Are we at risk? And again, this is a question to be posed. Is democracy at risk? Is Rahul Gandhi's disqualification from parliament a risk? Well, I personally don't think it's at risk, but I do think we are at a point of transition. And therefore, we have to do something to be able to ensure that each of us, our voices are heard. Because if our voices are not heard, we will transit to perhaps a society which is very different from the society that we see around us today. I'm assuming many people in this room come from different communities, different religions, different caste biases, and so on and so forth. But collectively, in a university like this, do you discriminate with each other because of your religion or your caste or your color or community? I'm assuming you don't, right? Many of you maybe are not even aware that you come from a different caste or a community or whatever. And that's what the richness of India is. It is this collective syncretic tradition that we have to hang on to be able to move forward. 75 years ago, every headline in the world when India attained independence from London to New York said that India would fail because it wasn't being dominated by a particular religion, as was Pakistan or the United States or Russia or Turkey or wherever. And Pakistan would succeed because it had a unifying call, which was religion. But that's not come to pass, has it? So what is it that's changed? And why is it that we need, as a majority religion, we need to dominate in every form? What is the insecurity that we have? I can imagine you're insecure because you haven't got 98% and you won't get admission into whatever college, 99.9%. Sorry, these days you have to get 100% or 101% to get admission. But that apart, what is the insecurity? Can we reflect on what we need to do? Can we reflect on what our role in this is? A lot of people turn around and say to me, you know, you speak out, you shouldn't do so. But I just feel that being silent is being complicit. That every time somebody is lynched in a train or pushed out or beaten up or hammered, I'm the murderer. Because I haven't stood up. I haven't stopped the violence. I haven't stopped the hatred. I haven't said to those people that there is no place for this in a civilized, democratic society. There is no place. Violence is something that we have to learn to be able to understand, whether it's verbal violence or physical violence. And it is invariably our first resort. Thappad maar dunga. Gali de doge. It happens all the time. It happens with our staff, it happens with our siblings, it happens with our friends, it happens with our parents. You're always finding some form of hate with which to push back when you are attacked or you feel hurt. Is there another way? Maybe. Is there any place for empathy? Can we look at love not just as love between two people as in a relationship, but love as a universal energy that can be used for positive good? And if we don't, then what? If we're going to be brought up to hate, and hate is very sexy, it's very easy to press the nuke button because it's a sexy thing to do, right? WWF or Discovery Channel when you're seeing every animal eating the other animal. It's great fun. But can we find a different narrative which is equally sexy, which is the narrative of empowerment, which is the narrative of discovery, which is the narrative of innovation, which is the narrative of being able to make possible every dream? In the second wave of COVID, at 7:30 in the morning, I got a call, and I'm not even awake at 7:30 in the morning. I'm a late riser, and I tend to take my first call at 10 o'clock. But because the phone just kept ringing, I picked it up. And this guy on the other end of the phone said, you know, I was a dancer. I used to dance at Bharatiya Kala Kendra. I set up a place for costume making. And then COVID came. My wife fell ill. She went to hospital, she died, I had all of these bills to pay. So last night I was going to kill myself and my two daughters. And then I said, if I kill myself, nobody will know how the arts have suffered. So I decided that I would kill myself publicly today at 4 o'clock. And I've been told by everybody, if I need to make a difference, I should get you to endorse my suicide at 4 p.m. today. 7:30 in the morning, not a good time to tell me you're going to kill yourself and I should endorse your killing. So anyway, I Googled and I realized this guy had announced that he's going to kill himself, so on and so forth. Picked up the other phones, sent a counselor to look at the girls, raised in about half an hour a couple of lakhs, made sure it was in his bank even while I was speaking to him, and convinced him that he shouldn't kill himself. Sadly, last October, he did finally kill himself because he was depressive. But why? Because people are desperate. And there's not enough that we can do to help them. Mental health today is one of the biggest issues that we see. It's a ticking time bomb. So every time there's violence and there's all of this hatred and all of this phone stuff that you all keep doing, it is your mental health which is at stake. Because we are so plugged in 24/7, it does impact our synapse. And you all need to be aware of that. There has to be times or down times when you all are not necessarily on your phones. Because at the end of the day, like any flu or COVID or cough or accident or break in the arm, your mental health is the only thing that anchors you and keeps you normal or normal in that sense of the word normal, but it's vital. And it's vital for the whole world to be able to do that. So again, this is for you today a responsibility and a duty to yourself. Don't do it for anybody else. Don't do it because your parents have told you, or we've told you, or teachers have told you. Do it because you need to do it for yourself. You need your downtime. We keep outsourcing everything to the computer. Your computing, your chat GPT, your essays, your writing, your spell checks, your getting to Jindal University, you put in the Google map and it'll get you there. Are we going to outsource our minds in the future? Is that what we were talking about with the zombie cult? Is that what's going to happen? Where we willfully kill our minds or outsource our minds to a higher technology which we use to compute everything, including our emotions. Does that make sense in any way? It doesn't, right? We could have done this online. I wouldn't have quite worn that, but we could have still done it online. But it's different when you have an energy exchange to some extent. I mean, online, it didn't matter. You could have still been on your phone and you could have been on a blank screen. But here, at least, you know, maybe there's one word getting through. So there are limitations in terms of what technology can do. There are limitations what technology should be doing, especially in the area of creativity. And what is it that defines us? Creativity. Every day when you wake up and do something, it's your creativity at the fore. And if you're not being creative, then what are you doing? You know, then you should be resigning from this university and going off to do whatever else you wanted to do. Universities like this, their role is to make you think creatively. Is to turn your head around and be able to give you the possibility of inquiry, of asking that question, why? Why should I do this? What if I did that? And it's through that asking of the question you can create what I hope all of you will go out to do in the near future, is create wealth. And wealth not necessarily translated into $1 billion for yourself, but wealth for the larger community and larger society. Because if we are not able to carry everybody with us, at the end of the day, it is going to come and bite us in the butt. We cannot have this completely imbalanced development form where people like you sit in this stunning hall and a stunning campus and are surrounded by squalor and filth and slums and people who have no access to education in any form. In the Jaipur Literature Festival, 4 years into our inception, you know, it got really busy. I was standing, we used to open the doors at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was standing, I received people for an hour every day. This man and boy came through the gates and the Haveli gates of Diggi Palace. And because I was standing, they came through the gates, they were stopped by security. Because I was there, I went up and I said, Bhaiya, kya baat hai? Or can I help you? And he said, you know, I sleep on the pavement up in front of SMS Hospital. And I know that I'll never be able to send my son to school nor buy him a book. But I thought if he heard a story, it would change his life forever. And therefore, I brought him here, and I'm really sorry. And he turned to go. And I said, no, this is for you. And this was the first time we realized that we actually had a successful program. Because when we started the Jaipur Literature Festival, our idea was not necessarily only for us, but that it would provide inquiry and knowledge for all kinds of people. And that's what we need to do. Each one of you has this responsibility. Because you've been afforded the right to be able to study here, you have to go out and spread the knowledge. That is your duty. It is your responsibility. And with that, is our collective responsibility. While Elon Musk may think he can jet off into space and find another planet, what they've realized is you stay in space for 6 months and your bones get brittle, they get holes in your bones. So this is the only planet we have, guys. We're going to be dead, long gone. It's you and your kids and your grandkids that are going to inhabit the mess that we've left for you. So, what is your responsibility? To find innovations which will carry and make sure that there is collective good for every innovation that comes through. Did you know that when the diabetes medicine was created, the patent for it was given at $1. That $1 today translates to what, $1,400 if you're not on whatever plan you are in the United States or wherever. We have to look at the greater good. We have no choice anymore. It cannot be us building gigantomous buildings and saying this is for us and we're going to lock ourselves in here. It doesn't work anymore. This intersection will come and bite us, as I said, in the butt. So I'm going to leave you with that, and maybe I'm going to leave you with one story about how the arts is a vital element in stitching much of this together. So in Australia, in Western Australia, the then Minister of Interior, this was 2000 or 2001, I can't remember, had come out to meet me and said, he said that, in Australia, 2% of the population is Aboriginal, whereas the prison population in Western Australia is 98%. So he invited me out because he heard about the work that we'd done with Salam Balak Trust, where we had mainstreamed many of our young people, including children in conflict with law. So I went out to Kalgoorlie, which is the largest open-faced mine in the world, which you can see from space. It has this one street, mostly entirely populated by Patels who run the motel and the grocery and so on and so forth. But it was fascinating because in a 100-mile radius in and around Kalgoorlie are these 17 Aboriginal communities which had 100% incarceration rate. 100%. That means cradle to grave, you were at prison at some point. And so we started studying why this was the phenomena. And my suggestion then at the end of this study period to government, I said, I asked for 3 or 4 things. What we understood was that when they came into town, when the Aboriginal population every Thursday or Friday, depending on where they were, came into the closest town to get dole, which was their only way of earning, getting money, the first building was the dole shop. The second building was the supermarket where invariably they were stolen from. The third building was the pub. The fourth building was the brothel. So they got drunk, went to the brothel, picked a fight, and the fifth building was the police station, which arrested them. So that was the cycle in which you went. And by and large, what you did is you basically abandoned your children on the street for a period while you were doing all of this activity. So what we said to them is that, can you take the dole truck out to the community? With the dole truck will go the supermarket truck. With the supermarket truck will go the pub truck. And I sort of limited it. I said you can only buy 14 pawas or whatever per week. And we got the communities together and I said to them, I said, why don't you tell your stories of the rivers and the planet and the stars and the moon and the lakes and the waters and the traditions that you all have had, and use material from the desert to do so. And it was going to be a 6-month project. And we asked the University of Western Australia to audit it and record and do a research around the project. 6 months later, when the project came to an end, the only thing that I forgot, I mean, I didn't envisage, was that the project was now spread over a 100-mile radius, so you could only see the installation from a helicopter. So, that was a problem. But it reduced the incarceration rate to 27%. from 100%. Why? Because you were empowering people to tell their stories in the way that they knew, in the tradition and style and culture that they welcomed and they were comfortable with, rather than a culture that was being thrust upon them. And therefore, again, to end with, remember, we are many cultures, we are many traditions, we are many languages, we are many dialects, we are many ways of wearing a sari, making that dal, creating a meal. It changes every 100 kilometers in India. That is our strength. That is the beauty. That is the richness. That is where we can aspire and inspire a world which looks to India for its diversity and the fact that it's been able to manage its contradictions. Our democracy is not at risk. What is at risk is our ability to be able to understand and empathize and spread the love. So please, you've had 2 amazing days. I think you've had many years of education. Go forth, do what you do best. Each of you I know will be leaders in the future, but bring to it empathy and love. And I promise you, it will translate into physical wealth in some way. And when you do find physical wealth, please do spread it around. Beyond a car and a house and a plane and what are you going to do with it? You're not taking it up there. Please share it and provide equal opportunities for those who have less than you do. Look around your campus, the children of your guards, the staff who's here, the people just outside the street, the folks down, down the lane. I forget what little hamlet that I passed by. There is stuff that you all can do, and I hope you all will do. Thank you.
Thank you for that very impressive valedictory address, Mr. Roy. Thank you also for addressing the larger themes of our conference, the idea of entrenched inequalities and the importance of innovation. The ideas of entitlement, misinformation, spewing hate, and the notion of inclusivity and egalitarianism are lessons that we would all need to revisit. On that note, I would like to call upon author, poet, and our colleague, Dr. Nandini Dhar, to respond to the valedictory address in a little more detail and also moderate any questions that the audience might have. Nandini?
Now? Yes. So thank you, first of all, Sanjay. So I would like to begin where you left off, which is the power of arts, the power of stories. And if I'm not wrong, you are trained as an artist, right?
Hello. Long hair doesn't equal an artist. I was trained as a theater person, and primarily I started on this route of setting up an arts organization, because when I used to run a theater company, which was Theater Action Group, which Barry John was our artistic director, which is where I met my wife. My father-in-law asked me, when we decided to get married, my father-in-law said, what do you do? So I said, I do theater. So he said, no, what's your day job? So I said, I do theater. So 6 months before the wedding, he again said, so young man, how are you going to look after my daughter? So I said, hey, I'm the artist, no looking after your daughter. Your daughter manages a very big company, she's looking after me. He wasn't impressed. Therefore, I had to get a job in television. Television had just opened up those days. Bobby Bedi, who then went on to produce Bandit Queen and The Rising, etc., had been approaching me for many years saying, come and direct something. And I used to say, electronic, no way, you're the devil, go behind me kind of stuff. But then I succumbed. I started working with Bobby, directed a couple of films and stuff, and then set up Teamwork, primarily to give an opportunity for our colleagues in theatre to have a day job so that they could do theatre.
So would you actually describe yourself as an entrepreneur? How would you describe yourself now?
Well, folks say I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not entirely sure what that means in many ways. You know, for me, the reason why I do what I do is because I love doing it. Everybody says, how do you do so much? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't need to look at a work-life balance because my work is my life and my life is my work and I love doing everything and I get to travel the world and I see some amazing stuff and I see a lot of rubbish. But you need to see rubbish to be able to understand what is fantastic, you know. So the entrepreneur thing is a byproduct. It's not necessarily, for me, it didn't start with, oh, I have to be an entrepreneur. It's a label which I carry. And yeah, I mean, if people think I'm an entrepreneur, that's great.
And I mean, to the extent that we have been looking at your work over the years, right? In a way, you have put a very different spin on the idea of organizing an event. And I mean, we have such a crass word for what you do in some ways, right? It's event management, which has a very corporatized bent to it and almost a very unimaginative kind of sense inbuilt into the very term event management. So how do you actually succeed to bring in the complexity that you do? And how do you actually revamp that word?
So what we do is actually we create festivals, we create platforms, and we create intellectual property. So we create brands. I mean, that's the way that we look at it. We don't strictly do events because what we don't do is car launches and birthday parties and weddings and corporate stuff. What we do is we think of what is it that is the need of the moment. So for example, when the Jaipur Literature Festival started, it started not necessarily only for literature. It started because there was a realization that in Jaipur, people were pulling down their old buildings and havelis in the city of Amer and Jaipur, and there was a need of the hour to find a value for built heritage. So in the same way, whether it was in Edinburgh or Avignon or in Johannesburg or other places where we've shown that you could introduce the arts to create value in property, that was the intervention, and the accident was literature. You know, so that was the intent. So in New York in whatever, 1995 or 96, there was this very, you know, they own most of the real estate in Times Square. And they had a daughter who used to love Indian weed. And she had come out of rehab, and then they came to me and said, you know, what can we do for her? She was the heir. And she loved Indian music and blah, blah, blah. So what I said to them is they had a whole host of warehouses just off the Hudson. And what I said to them is, so why don't you give rent-free accommodation to designers, to the LGBTQ community, to artists in each warehouse, and ensure there's good policing, because at that point of time, the mayor was very keen to clean up New York, which he did. And I said the value of this property would increase in a particular time period. So I said, when that does, you tear it down, you build whatever, you'll realize your value. She will find an inheritance, and you move them to the next building. And the next building, there were many warehouses. What happened was that in 1 year, all of this value of property in that place went up like 237%. So they tore everything down, moved everybody on, which is what we're seeing is happening in Harlem, for example, and which is exactly what we did again in South Africa and Johannesburg, when they came to us saying that Newtown had completely lost its value, and Standard Bank and FNB had told the city to approach us to get us in to find a solution. And when I went in and I realized there was all of this violence that was happening in Newtown, again we said, demarcate an arts precinct in Newtown, put in good policing and good lighting. And I promised, I said, in 3 years' time, I'll walk across Mary Fitzgerald Square with my mobile phone in my hand and I won't get mobbed. Today, it is the most vibrant place. And what we did is we set into place festivals in Mary Fitzgerald Square to be able to change the identity of the place from being vermin infested and a place for, you know, a different kind of, or the refugee population, to an artsy district. And it worked. You know, so when you come to the crossroads of how do you use the arts to create value as a value proposition, you can do so. Sadly, most of us look at the arts as, you know, jholawalas, and, you know, you're going to give them a donation or whatever. We don't look at arts in India as a value proposition, because all 1.3 billion of us are artists. We sing and dance our way from cradle to grave. So we don't value that Ram Leela or the Ramayana telling on the city square or the street corner, because it's all around us all the time. We are one of the only societies in the world where the classical forms, whether it's Kathak or Bharatanatyam or Carnatic music or North Indian forms, are alive and kicking without government subsidy and intervention. And that's saying something, because everybody has that in their DNA. You're born with that, which is amazing and valuable, and at peril to some extent.
I'm not sure, as a writer and a literature professor, to take this statement that literature was an accident. So let me actually grill you a little bit on that. So, you know, in a way, I think that the way we have understood literature, it's a work of solitude, right? At best, you have a group of writers, artists collaborating, coming together, but it's essentially about exclusivity, maybe not in the negative sense, but still it's an exclusive way of practicing oneself, one's skill, one's art. And I think that what Jaipur and following Jaipur, a lot of the other festivals have done, they have made spectacles out of literature. It not only literature, but also kind of, we can have a festival where we have books as objects in a way we have never really seen that 40 years back. We can have people who might not read a book but can go to witness something about the presence of the writers. So how do you feel about that process? So what was the kind of, I mean, one part of it is a property, but also, if I may ask, about the aesthetic side of it, that what are the things that are at stake when we transform something as kind of intrinsic and something that speaks to us of so much of interiority as literature to that kind of external space?
You know, one of the problems that we all have is that the visual world is far more sexy than the written word today. So everybody's on their phone, which is far more exciting than, say, listening or reading. So in my head, it was, what would make literature sexy? How can you get that incredible information of the Priyambada Natarajans who are talking about space, or the black hole, or Marcus du Sautoy who's talking about the intersection of AI and technology and the arts, etc. How can we inform people? So the only way, if we could have done it in IIC or IHC or, you know, in a hall like this for 200 people, but it would be for you and me, because you and me would only be inspired to come to a place like that. Whereas we were very clear that we wanted to do it for young people. And I didn't care whether the young person came in to do a selfie or have a pizza, but I wanted that young person in the room. And therefore, in our thinking, it was, if the young person stepped through, perhaps, they would pick up an idea or stumble upon an idea. And stumbling upon that idea, they would go away and say, wow, maybe I should read this book.
And Jaipur Literature Festival also has garnered a lot of criticism, right? Both from the right and the left. So what do you feel about the kind of the controversies, the criticism?
You know, I look like I'm a punching bag. I am. It's fine. Everybody, you know, the right thinks that we are, you know, just purely evil. The left thinks that we are not left enough and therefore we're purely evil and we're not doing enough. But we are very clear about what we do. My own philosophy of politics may sit left of center, but it's irrelevant. What we try and do is make sure that we have all perspectives represented. However, qualified by the fact that we're not, what's that one where everybody shouts? What's the television station? Republic TV, or sorry, I don't watch television. Republic TV or Times Now, which is, you know, you just shout and fight. But we are a considered platform where you then come and listen to everybody. And like I keep saying to the right, I said, you know, they say you don't have enough representation from the right. I said, it helps if you write a book first. And if you do, I promise you, if it's worthy of being presented, we'll present it. And we have. It's not that we haven't. We've also presented a lot of rubbish. You know, it's not that we haven't. Why? Because we do feel that there's a place for both. It is important to qualify that you have to present all kinds of writing, irrespective of whether we believe it's good or bad. What I may think is good, Rupi Kaur, for example, when I first, all of you know Rupi Kaur? Anybody knows Rupi Kaur? Rupi Kaur is a very famous Canadian poet, right? I love, you love, we love, she love. When I first stumbled upon her poetry, I'm like, this is poetry? So I was puzzled. I was like, you know, honestly puzzled. But she had this millions of people sort of, you know, sort of faint when they come to the room. So we invite her to Jaipur and I stepped out to see Rupi Kaur. And I was gobsmacked. There were 15,000 kids holding on to her book, dog-eared, doing I love, we love, she loves, we, you know, whoever loves, which is great. You know, I've been talking about love. But do I think it's good? No. Do I think it's important to present it? Absolutely. It's imperative. It's absolutely important to be able to present all perspectives, which is how you form an opinion. I love it or I hate it. When you hate something doesn't mean that you're then going to attack and kill it. You're then going to find something that you love. Or you're going to hone your own skill to be able to better it. The youngest person who's written and presented at the Jaipur Literature Festival is the age of 9. He wrote his book at the age of 7 because from the age of 3 he had been coming with his mother to the Jaipur Literature Festival. And when I was hijacked to release his book in some convocation at a university in Jaipur, I was like, whose book is this? And, you know, they said this kid. And I'm like, oh, let me see the book. And I said, well, the kid couldn't have written it because it was so incredible. And the mother brought the diary of the kid to me, where the kid's written in his handwriting. It was incredible. The oldest person inspired to write at the Jaipur Literature Festival was a 92-year-old Prem Krishnan, who at 92 years wrote a dirge about her marital rape. How brave was that? At 92, she takes this risk and she writes about marital rape even as her kids are alive and there. That's inspiring. That's amazing. And each of us, yes, we do WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram. That's our articulation. But you have to hone your articulation. And in honing the articulation, you're able to create your identity. You know, apart from the pouting lips, there are other ways to create an identity, which is through the written word.
Yeah, and let me just get back to one of the examples you gave.
Sorry, I was being facetious. I do apologize, but I was trying to entertain you all because she's been on the phone and she hasn't stopped, so I'm really worried that I haven't performed.
So if we can get back to one of the things you were saying earlier about Ramlila and Ramayana. And unfortunately, I mean, we live in a moment where literature is being used, right, and Ramayana specifically, to actually lynch and kill human beings. So how can we actually reclaim epics, right, the reclaim Ramayana in this country so that...
Well, go back to the source, right? You don't have to read Tulsi Ram's and Ramayan, which was created in a particular century with a particular a perspective on women. Go back to the source material. Go back to any of the source materials of the Ramayana and read it in its original. Simple. Why is it that we're continuing to consider this particular edition of the Ramayana that targets women in a particular way and looks at caste factors in a particular way as the Bible? Why is it that the original texts or the original forms of the Ramayana, which are many, are not taught, not discovered, not articulated? If we want to claim back, I'm assuming what you're saying is, can we claim back Hinduism
not
through its epics, through its...
I mean, I'm personally not that interested in claiming back Hinduism, and I also don't think that epics and Ramayana, it's the sole property of the Hindus. But is there any way we can reclaim the text, or should we even?
You know, reclaiming maybe is too big a word. So let's hold reclaiming for a second. What we do need to do is read widely. So while you may read Amish Tripathi's whatever, Ravan and Shiva trilogy and so on and so forth, which is a particular perspective on all of this, read other people's tellings of the same story. Remember, at the end of the day, building of temples is a fairly new phenomena in the Hindu state. Remember, Hinduism is one of the only philosophies rather than religions which does not have hell. We have a slippery moral slope where everything is okay. Krishna can, have all his girlfriends and yet have his consort, right? If you go to Konarak or Khajuraho, which was pre-Islamic tradition of architecture, temple architecture, you'll see all the gods doing everything they can to each other and animals, and it doesn't matter about LGBTQI++. They were cool gods. Why have we suddenly become so uncool? And doing it in the name of religion. Come on, guys, read your stuff, do your cool things. Anybody questions you, say, fuck you, go back to the scriptures. Sorry, Dean. Apologies, guys, sorry. My wife is not with me. Before I go on stage, she always says, behave. And I'm like, but it's been a 2-hour drive, so, I forgot that.
So, okay, on that note, we would open it up for you. So, any questions for Sanjay?
Take everything that I said with a pinch of salt. It goes with the long hair. Don't take it seriously.
Hello, sir. It's really nice to have you here. You talked about the accessibility of arts and academia, and Jaipur Literature Festival is one of the most accessible festivals. You have to either not pay at all or pay a very measly amount to actually enter the festival and attend whichever session you wish to. And you also talked about innovation and inspiration, and you mentioned ChatGPT. So I wanted to ask, in an age where art is currently being threatened by technology, by apps like Midjourney and ChatGPT, and many of us are writers and artists here. How do you think accessibility comes into point? Because when people come in to support AI apps like these, they're like, oh, it makes art more accessible to people who don't get to access it generally, because this is art is such an elitist sort of space. So what do you think?
Tell everybody which department you volunteered in Jaipur, just for a second.
The first time bookstore, the second time book signing.
See, she had access to every writer and every book, which is the reason she asked this question. So, art is not threatened by technology. Technology and art can go hand in hand. I've just come from Bangalore. I went to see the Museum of Art and Photography, and I hope anybody from Bangalore, or if you go to Bangalore, do please go and make a visit, where they've used technology to be able to democratize and access art. So, for example, you know, they have a huge, ginormous collection, but it's not a very big building, it's a 5-story building, where obviously in the galleries you can't display the entire collection. So what is it that they do? So in every room, it's like filled with display boards, right? Like display monitors. So you go to the search monitor and say, I want to see Shakti Burman. So you click on Shakti Burman or whoever the artist that you wish to see. You click on that, and instantly in that room, for the time that you've said, say 20 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute, every monitor will show Shakti Burman's collection or work for you to peruse even while you're standing there. And downstairs, for example, you know, we talk about lighting a lamp before everything. So they got me to light a lamp, which means that I had to focus my phone on the QR code. The QR code asked me, do I want to light a hanging lamp, a standing lamp, a traditional lamp, etc. Once I clicked that, on the main facade of the building, you had all of these lamps. You enter your name, and the lamp lights through technology. ChatGPT, for example, I mean, when somebody in my office did ChatGPT for me, it was mostly correct, except the last line. They married me to Namita Gokhale. They said his wife is Namita Gokhale, which was an oops moment. But that apart, ChatGPT, you know, it's like basic training. So if you want to get to the basic, you can do that. But what is it when you want to be inspired? ChatGPT can't write an inspirational piece of poetry. It can help you apparently pass your examination. So Dean, be warned on that. But it can't inspire you. The human mind's inspiration, which is when it connects empathy to sadness, to an emotional quotient, to hatred, to all of that, it is through that lived experience in some way or collective experience that you create something which is inspired. Now for ChatGPT to have a breakup, I'm not sure how that works. Or ChatGPT to go on romance or a date night with another ChatGPT. Not sure how that works either. Or a ChatGPT to hate, physically, emotionally hate, or be depressed, or you know, the world is going to an end. You can't do that, right? That's what the expression of art is about. It's about being able to articulate an emotion which only you as the person articulated can feel and make it real for yourself. But because the articulation is a particular way, it becomes an articulation of the common mind and the common purpose. So your hurt is everybody's hurt. And that's what makes an inspired piece of writing different from a banal piece. So that's what makes ChatGPT banal and an inspired piece of writing or an inspired piece of painting. However, we did this exercise with Marcus de Sautoy where we showed the great masters. We showed on the left-hand side the great masters' work, and on the right-hand side we showed the AI's articulation of the great master's work. And we got everybody in the hall, this was in Ireland, in Belfast and in London, to choose which was the master's work and which was the AI's work. 100 out of 100, everybody chose the master's work. Why? Because the master's work was flawed. AI's work was perfect. Perfection is not part of our DNA. We all aspire to perfection. But perfection is a falsity in some sense. You know, and when you look at that, when you look at technology, which is trying to get to perfection, how does it do it? It trains the robot to be able to turn that screw to perfection while making a car. But art is about accident. If you don't have an accident, you don't have art. You can't. If you don't have accident, you don't have emotion. It's the accident which is what makes us who we are. We can continue to aspire to be perfect. But we are all imperfect, right? We're all sort of somewhat loony in our own ways or eccentric or whatever, which is great. Why would you all want to be perfect? Sounds like a boring world.
Okay, we have time for a couple of more questions.
Questions aren't absolutely essential. Huh? We can all go for gin and tonic instead. Sorry. Oops. That was an oops moment.
Thank you so much for that wonderful speech. It was certainly very insightful. My question to you was that recently the inauguration of the Neeta Mukesh Ambani Cultural Center has created a lot of buzz in the news, and a lot of media attention is being given to the international celebrities who are attending this
And Shah Rukh Khan, come on, yeah. Shah Rukh Khan is not international celebrity. Every second Instagram is Shah Rukh Khan.
Well, he has a charm, no one can deny that. As someone who has organized such spectacular cultural events yourself, do you think that this international attention to events that are supposed to promote Indian culture detracts attention from local and regional artists and practitioners?
Any investment in the arts, any, and in education, like the Jindals have done here or wherever else or whoever else, is vital. We don't have enough platforms for the arts. We don't have. Every city should have a Neeta Mukesh Ambani Center. I visited the center. It is just beyond opulent. I mean, the foyer is, forget a five-star hotel. It's something else. The main opera house is stunning. Can it be a crucible for work from here? Not necessarily. It's not been built for that. It's been built for the Lion King and the Aladdin and the Humpty Dumpty and whatever. So is that bad? No. Hopefully what will happen is those kinds of work with technical expertise and that scale will come in there. At some point of time, they'll all lose money, which is okay. They have enough money to lose. And it'll inspire artists in India to create work of technical expertise. In the 18 years that we've done Meta, we can track from the first year to the 18th year, which was this year, how theater has completely transformed in its writing tradition. Earlier, for example, much of English theater used to be rip-offs from off-Broadway or off-West End. Today, these are original writings. The theater that comes to us does not necessarily anymore come from the Bombays and the Delhis. In fact, they don't. They come from the Assams and the Manipurs and the Sikkims and the Kochis and the Cuttaks and so on and so forth. And why? Because we have an outpouring of incredible creativity in this country. What we don't have is the wherewithal to be able to make that possible. It's not enough to say, oh, theater, you only need inspiration and passion. No, you need lighting, you need sound, and I mean, if this hall was to be redone, I'd sort of say, please build a better stage with wings and have better lighting and do something that represents that it's India and not that we're in anywhere else in the world. What bit of this hall represents India? Nothing. Maybe the carpet. It's ghastly. No, sorry. Wrong thing to say. Oops again. Close my mouth. No, but we need to do things that are representative of our culture. Yes or no? That's how you'll be able to create these opportunities. You know, that's what they do. Hopefully they're doing in Parliament now. They're representing India. Good or bad, we don't know. They have an angry lion. Cool, we have angry lions, no problem. It would have been nice if we had a smiley lion as well. But hey, whoever the architect thought angry lion was better, so be it. It's somebody's representation, which is okay.
Okay, as much as we would love to continue to talk to
Apologies for anything that I've said, barring the gin and tonic, which I think is essential.
Yes, so we can have only one more question or comment.
Take two together and then I'll answer all of them together, or take three together. I'll answer all.
Yeah, so
I can ramble.
Hi, sir. Sir, my question is a bit more philosophical. So, in the beginning of your speech, you mentioned about how other countries have taken inspiration from our constitution and then built upon that, and then they have developed and gotten better than us, if that's okay to say. But then my question is, now currently we see we are more inclined towards the Western side and following their direction, hopefully not in theatre and any artistic form, in that we have a totally own identity. So I just want to know your thoughts on the same. And great hair.
No, thank you. Great hair too. Though you know, yours is from the bottle, right? The color. Mine is from the bottle, the white.
Oh, mine is natural.
No, so when you say better, you know, it's better. Our constitution was written by a group of people in a particular time to address a particular inspiration that they came from. The South African constitution that borrowed heavily from the Indian constitution, as well as a number of the other African countries, they wrote it in their time for their reality. So when some of them bettered it or evolved it, it was for that. The South African constitution starts by giving equal rights to the LGBTQI community, for example, because it was written 40 years down the road, right? So it's a new reality. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, you know, it's better or worse. When it comes to our looking at the West, remember, the CIA, as you know, for a very long time and continues to be, funds 14 to 21% of every Hollywood movie that pays homage to the American flag. And they use that then to sell Coca-Cola and McDonald's and whatever else that you sell as statecraft. It's a brand exercise that America did. In the 60s and the 70s, for example, my parents and my brother and my grandfather and everybody went to the UK to study, because that's what was the inspiration of the moment. We were still very much part of a particular system. Today, your first point of call would be the Americas. It would not necessarily be UK. If you didn't get it to America, you'd look at Canada. Didn't look at Canada, you'd get it to Australia, though Australia now gets a very large percentage of Indian students. So it's the mindset, it's about capturing mindset. And they have been very successfully been able to capture our mindset. So when Lord Macaulay came through India in the early 19th century, after India was transferred to the crown, remember, we were being ruled by a company. So imagine that we were being ruled by Facebook or Meta, which you all are being ruled by in some way. But in those days, it was, you know, the East India Company. When Lord Macaulay, after it transferred to the crown, came, he went back to the House of Lords and he made a very important statement. He said, "Me lords, I have traveled the length and breadth of this country. They are not like Africans. These are inspired people who are a proud race with their own culture and tradition. And if we have to conquer their mind, we have to show that our tradition and our language betters their tradition." So therefore, the Cambridge Society was then sent forward to set up what became the first schools in India, leading to the colleges like St. Stephen's and so on and so forth. So it was a mindset thing. Today, what is the challenge out in the street, even by the present dispensation, to capture your minds? To say that the majority is at risk because of a minority who is disempowered, and as per the white paper says that they have no role in terms of economic activity because you've targeted them again and again, yet the majority feels that they're being threatened. It's a mindset thing. We forget. That's where it starts from. They take symbols which are of our inspiration and are common to all of us. And they've turned, I mean, you know, the very color saffron now means something else, for example. I mean, you know, again, I'm giving somewhat simplistic answers because we have no time. But, you know, that's what it is.
You said you'd take one more, the girl with the blue, because she's
Yeah.
waving her hand.
Well, why don't you just stand up and say
Yeah, we can take one more. So, yes.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like it wouldn't be like much of a question, it'll be just a comment. Like relating to some of your answers, it actually takes, based on articulation, actually takes back to one of my cousin's articles which is called like Dead Poetry Society. And he writes that because of like this technology, we are not able to articulate well. And also like in one of our interdisciplinary seminar classes and also in one of our history classes, because our lives are basically getting easier, our gray matter is getting less and less. So like, this is what I'm so sorry, I'm just freezing.
I think I've understood what the comment that you're making.
Yes.
You know, I think in India, because we're always living at the edge, gas nahi mil raha hai, pani kahan se aayega, as opposed to Europe, mind the gap between the train and the platform. This bottle of nuts has nuts in it. This bottle of milk is milk, you know. They live in safe societies. What happens in safe societies? You stop thinking outside of the box. So at one level, that's what technology is doing.
Yes.
It's creating in your mind a safe space so you're not exploring. However, in India, we're always using jugaad to find our way, or network. But if you look at jugaad as make do, that's one thing. But if you instead turn that on its head and make jugaad make possible, you know, not make do, make possible. That's inspirational. And I think till we continue to live on the edge as we do, whether it's us here in America, where the African American Latino communities, which are completely marginalized by and large, you won't be at this risk of being in the safe space. The refugee influx into Europe should be seen as a blessing to Europe rather than the other way around. Because today they're having to look at how do you manage a whole new group of people who are not at the same economic parity, nor language, nor necessarily religion, and most importantly, do not share the same culture and tradition. So then again, you've turned that into your head and you've created a space which is to some extent difficult.
Yeah.
And to be able to
And
try and find solutions, as you're saying,
Yes.
finding a solution and creating an innovation to address that problem will keep us ticking. And therefore, innovation, technology will be used for innovation, hopefully. Till the whole planet is economically at the same place and there's no discrimination and nobody hates anybody and everybody is the same, it'll never happen. So don't worry too much.
Yes. I also want to say one thing based on perfectionism, that's what you said. I've always seen perfectionism as an illusion because we've grown up thinking that no one is perfect, but despite that, we strive for perfectionism. And perfectionism looks good, but then at the same time, first, it burdens us, like to a huge extent. And second, it doesn't this kind of imperfection doesn't give feeling. It just gives robots, basically. So that's what.
You know, again, perfection is one thing which I said, you know, it's what we all need to strive for is excellence in what we do. Perfection is, it's difficult. But excellence, and excellence for each of us is at a different level. We don't all have to aspire for the same level of excellence. But within the space that we occupy, if we can strive for excellence, that should be the moot inspiration.
Okay. Unfortunately, we would actually have to conclude here, and Yashodhara is already up there. So thanks to everyone for being here, especially on a Sunday evening. And I would give it up to Yashodhara.
Thank you so much.
And you're going to edit out all of this that I've said, right? Chop, chop.
I'm really sorry. We have run. Yes, for all of you who have questions, and I'm sure you have plenty, that was a very detailed and wonderful Q&A. But whatever questions you might have, I'm sure Mr. Roy is still very much with us for a while, and you can absolutely take on the question as you see fit. So now may I invite our Dean, Professor Kathleen Modrowski, to kindly felicitate Mr. Roy and thank him for the wonderful valedictory address and incredible patience with all the questions.
I wanted them to hear me, but thank you so much for that. All those wonderful lessons. This will keep you warm and cozy.
May I also request our Dean to give the vote of thanks and sort of officially declare the conference to a close, but you won't escape so easily. We also have acknowledgements coming in after that. Kathleen, may we request you to come in and give our vote of thanks? Thank you.
Okay. Yes. What can I say? I was sitting there with a veritable rain of words and ideas coming down on me, and I was trying to be able to absorb all of them. So this was an absolutely exquisite and unexpectedly rich presentation. I would like to add one thing, and I guess I'm not supposed to comment too much, but I'd like to say that you made a point about space and art. And we've had for 3 years now students who have come and interned and had a trip to the Jaipur Lit Festival. Every time I went there, I was so amazed because part of it was an inquiry into the literature, but also an of equal importance, an inquiry into the space, the town, the people attending. So I thought, this is really beautiful. This is creating a world environment through the vehicle of literature. And it was such an enriching experience for everyone. So thank you so much for the excellent work that you're doing there and everywhere else. And thank you so much for really underscoring what we have tried to do during our existence here as a School of Liberal Arts and Humanities, and that is to bring arts, and I mean the artistic imagination, not how to draw well, not how to write a good poem, all of these things are good, but this imagination and these multiple ways of seeing the world, to bring them forward in everything that we look at, that our inquiry into the world around us is very important. Also, another thing that I am very thankful for you and the many stories you tell is the importance of telling stories. You know, stories are really the bedrock of our being, of our culture, who we are, how we create. I'm not sure if I agree that we can have true empathy with each other, but I believe we can create some kind of understanding by listening to each other's stories, by recognizing we often lie about who we are, what our stories are, and trying to tell with great honesty what our stories are. So thank you so much for your participation with us, the time that you've taken, the energy you've put into it, and we really hope that you will consider this your home in a way. We will try and do something about the architecture and about the carpeting to make it feel more authentic. But you have to understand, we're simple here. So thank you very much, and we're going to end the program with Gargi. And Yashodhara, who have done such a wonderful job in the entire organization, bringing people together. But I'd like to see you stand for our guest, please. He's done a wonderful job. Let's give him a hand standing, please. See, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we are at the end of 2 long, very tiring days. So just if you could bear with me for just 1 more minute. This is from both Gargi and I. At the end of the conference, we just wanted to thank a number of you, all of you who are, of course, in this room supporting us, working tirelessly to make sure that the conference goes off without a hitch. But to a number of you, we owe great debt of gratitude and thanks. It's with profound appreciation. Without you, the URC would not have been possible. Of course, starting with our Dean, Kathleen, thank you for being the inspiration and the vision behind the URC. And to both Kathleen and Joyani for being a constant source of support along the way, for the different departments from FMT and FMO and Food and Transport and the Vice Chancellor's office. They made sure that every single event went without a hitch. To our colleagues in different subcommittees, some of you have been working with us from the very beginning, from publicity to communication to the abstract selection committee. Apologies for bothering you at all odd hours, but thank you so much for your patience, your forbearance, and your continual sincerity, and for a number of our colleagues who've been working with committees that you were forced to sort of jump onto at the nth moment, and you really sort of worked not just terribly hard, but made sure that Gargi and I didn't have much to worry about, from food to the volunteer subcommittee, to transport, to the idea of even booking a room. Thank you so much. And finally, not the least, a huge round of applause to first our student presenters. I think it takes a lot of courage to go on with the work. To present your research in the way that you did. And finally, and this is last but not the least, but to our student volunteers. Thank you for just being kind and humane and reminding both of us of our kindness and humanity in the course of the last, especially for the last week or so. Thank you for looking after us more than we looked after you. And thank you, because without you, the URC and everything around it would just not be possible. Yes. And just a special shout out to Ritika and Isha, because... Yes. Yes, and that brings us to the end of what we think is a successful URC. Yes. Thank you so much, and we hope to see all of you next year where we won't be the conveners. So, yeah, thank you.
We request all faculty members to please join us for dinner at Rendezvous. Yes, it's a wrap.
Can all the volunteers please stay back for a group picture, please, please? Please, anyone who's wearing a purple t-shirt, please head to the stage. Thank you.